Mabuhay, or in Kapampangan, luwid kayo. Today's question comes from Laguna, Philippines. Biahilo asks, can you tell us more about the Balangiga bells? The bells of Balangiga are these huge church bells from the town of, well, Balangiga on the island of Samar in central Philippines. In his recent State of the Nation address, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte of the Philippines mentioned these historic bells as he demanded that these historic bells be returned to the Philippines. That if the United States was sincere in its goodwill to the Filipino people, that the bells should be returned to the Filipino people. Well, you're probably asking, what the hell is up with these bells? Why are they even in the United States? Well, one is in Korea. Why are they not in the Philippines? And why is it important for them to return the bells to the Philippines? I'll try to answer all of this in as short of a video as I possibly can. So first, these church bells are over a century old, and they were very significant and still are very significant to the people of Balangiga, and they were taken away by the Americans over 100 years ago during the Philippine-American War. So what happened was that in 1901, at the height of the war, the American forces enforced this aggressive and violent policy in which they starved the entire island of Samar in central Philippines in the Visayas region. They blocked key ports, deprived people of food and supplies, and even destroyed their properties. They did all of this to weaken the Filipino forces who are during this time fighting the Americans for their independence. An independence that for Filipinos they have already earned but is now being taken away by the Americans, who not long ago were their allies in fighting against the Spaniards. So in a way, the Filipinos felt betrayed by the American allies. And Balangiga was a major strategic port town along the coast of eastern Samar. And the Americans wanted to control Balangiga, not just to weaken and starve the Filipino forces, but also because Samar was at the heart of the Manila hemp industry. The Manila hemp, or abaca, was used and is still being used today to create a wide variety of products. It was a very lucrative and highly profitable trade that the Americans wanted to control. So in the beginning, the interactions between the people of Balangiga and the Americans were very cordial. But as the days went on, the Americans became more and more violent. They became aggressive against the people. And of course, the local people became increasingly frustrated and angry. And not to mention, cruelly starved by the Americans. I mean, who wouldn't be angry? Innocent people were being starved, detained, their properties either confiscated or destroyed, even though they were initially actually friendly or amicable to the Americans. It's like welcoming guests, friends to your home, and then suddenly they turn against you. So late in the evening, on September 27, 1901, after much frustration, the women and children of the town of Balangiga were quietly sent away. They quietly left the town. The men were left behind pretending to prepare for their town festival. And a lot of the men were also dressed in women's clothing to deceive the watchful eyes of the Americans. And the Americans did not even notice that the town's entire population of women and children had already left. And then the next morning, at around 6:30 or 6:45 a.m., the people of Balangiga launched an attack, a surprise attack. The bells of Balangiga rang to signal the start of the day. And normally, these church bells would ring for mass or for prayers. But this morning, unknown to the Americans, the bells were rang to signal an attack. While the Americans were still having their breakfast, they hacked American soldiers to death. They were only armed with bolos. And even though the Americans were armed with superior firearms, they lost heavily. More than half of their entire forces in the town of Balangiga. So this is what is now known as the Balangiga Massacre in history. But what happened next was more of a bloodshed and a far worse massacre, an atrocity that has been buried and almost forgotten. In retaliation to the massacre, the Americans were fuming with anger. General Jacob Smith was sent to pacify Samar, and General Smith ordered his men to kill and burn. He said to them, "I want no prisoners. I wish you to kill and burn. The more you kill, the more you burn, the better it will please me. The interior of Samar must be made a howling wilderness." In short, he wanted his men to kill everyone on the island of Samar and burn everything down to the ground. In fact, he also issued an order declaring all the natives of Samar as enemies and be treated as such, regardless if they were innocent or hostile or whatnot. Smith ordered his Marines to kill everyone over the age of 10, and that is what happened. The people of Samar were brutally killed by the thousands. Some say at least 15,000, while others say up to 50,000 people died in this one island alone. The exact numbers will never be known to us. But what I know for sure was that this was an act of genocide. An act of genocide committed by the Americans who promised to bring liberty and justice to the Filipino people. A people that they called their little brown brothers. But instead, they brought violence and bloodshed. Entire villages were burnt to the ground. And in one instance, an innocent young Filipino boy riding peacefully atop a carabao was gunned down half a dozen times by the Americans. And this attracted the villagers to come out of curiosity of what happened. And despite being peaceful, despite having no weapons, despite just coming out to see what happened to the little boy, the people of the village were gunned down in cold blood. Many of them were women and children. Innocent people were often trapped between the engulfing flames devouring their homes and the American bullets. And despite pleading mercy and despite having white flags, innocent people were shot to the ground. And this is just one chapter over a long and brutal war filled with merciless bloodshed and trauma. The people of Balangiga were inhumanely treated by the Americans. They were seen and treated as less than humans. And when they finally had enough, when they finally mustered the strength to fight back, the Americans retaliated brutally and unleashed such violence that today would be considered an atrocious war crime. The sad thing is that not many of us remember this chapter of history, not even in the Philippines, and especially not here in the United States. It is only now that many are beginning to ask about it. The bells were taken away from the town of Balangiga as sort of a war prize, a trophy for the Americans to express their pride over their actions to pacify the island of Samar, a trophy to symbolize their victory over their little brown brothers. To this day, the bells are being displayed as a symbol of American valor, one in an American base in South Korea and two in Wyoming. And despite numerous attempts from the Philippine government, despite the fact that the Philippines had been a loyal ally, the United States consistently refused to return these historic bells to its rightful place, to the people and the town where it truly belongs. I can keep talking about this for days if needed, but for now, this video is way longer than expected. So yeah, that is it for me today. And if you got questions that you feel like I have the knowledge or the wisdom to answer, feel free to ask me. Feel free to ask Kirby. See you next time. Or in Tagalog, kita kits, and in Kapampangan, Miki Tix. Bye!